The thunder of hooves along the dusty road barely registered with Lillian Vance as she stared blankly through the stage-coach window. Her face, a canvas of purples and yellows, told a story she wished to forget. April 1885 was supposed to mark the beginning of her new life, not another chapter of pain. The stage lurched to a stop in the center of Montana City, Montana Territory, and Lillian felt her heart seize. This moment stepping into the unknown was the culmination of desperate letters, carefully chosen words, and the last of her meager savings. The driver opened the door, and she pulled her shawl higher to conceal the worst of her bruises. "Miss, we've arrived," he announced, offering a weathered hand. Lillian stepped down, her modest valise clutched to her chest, containing all that remained of her former life in Boston. She blinked against the bright sunlight, momentarily disoriented. The town wasn't much a single street lined with wooden structures, the persistent smell of livestock and dust, and curious eyes that followed her arrival. She was looking for a man named Lucas Maddox, a cattle rancher who had responded to her advertisement as a mail order bride with kind words and promises of a good life. In her desperate situation, she had seized the opportunity, though now, standing alone in this frontier town, doubt crawled through her. "Miss Vance." A deep voice drew her attention. Turning, she found herself facing a tall man in his late 20s. His face, tanned from years under the sun, was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He wore simple clothes, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, worn denim pants and scuffed boots. "Nothing like the polished gentleman of Boston, Mr. Maddox?" she asked hesitantly. He nodded, offering a cautious smile that quickly faded as he noticed her attempt to hide her face. "I've been waiting for you." His eyes, a clear blue that reminded her of summer skies, narrowed with concern. Lillian tried to smile but winced as the motion pulled at her split lip. "It's good to finally meet you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas moved closer, his expression darkening as he got a better look at her face. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Shame washed over her. This wasn't how she wanted to begin. "It's nothing, just an accident before I left." The lie hung between them, transparent and fragile. Lucas didn't press, but the tightening of his jaw told her he wasn't convinced. "Let me take your bag," he offered instead, gently lifting the valise from her trembling hands. As they walked toward his wagon, Lillian felt dizzy with exhaustion. 3 days on the stagecoach, barely sleeping for fear of nightmares, and the constant throbbing pain had drained her. When her knees buckled, Lucas caught her with surprising gentleness for a man of his size. "Easy now," he murmured, supporting her weight. "When's the last time you ate something proper?" Lillian couldn't remember. The bruises on her ribs made each breath painful, and food had been the last thing on her mind. "I'm fine," she insisted weakly. Lucas helped her onto the wagon bench, his movements careful. "We'll stop at Doc Wilson's before heading to the ranch," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "It's about an hour's ride out, and I want him to take a look at you." Fear lanced through her. "Please, no, I don't need a doctor." Lucas studied her face, his expression unreadable. "Miss Vance, I can see you're hurt. I don't know what happened before you came here, and I won't push you to tell me, but I can't in good conscience take you all the way out to the ranch without making sure you're all right." Lillian wanted to protest further, but she lacked the strength. She nodded slightly, and Lucas climbed up beside her, taking the reins. As they moved through town, she felt the weight of curious stares. A mail-order bride was notable enough in Montana City. One arriving battered and bruised was certain to fuel gossip for weeks. The doctor's office was a small building at the edge of town. Lucas helped her down from the wagon and guided her inside, his hand respectfully at her elbow. "Doctor." Wilson was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He asked no questions as he examined her injuries, merely making thoughtful humming sounds and occasional notes. "Bruised ribs," he confirmed after a thorough examination. "Nothing broken, thankfully, but you'll need rest. The facial contusions will heal in time." He turned to Lucas, who had been waiting outside the examination room. "She needs care, Maddox, plenty of rest, good food, and this salve for the bruising." He handed over a small ceramic pot. "Apply it twice daily. It'll help with the pain and speed healing." Lucas nodded grimly, paying the doctor before carefully helping Lillian back to the wagon. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains as they left town, casting long shadows across the trail. Lillian sat stiffly, pain radiating with each bump and jolt. "I'm sorry it's not a smoother ride," Lucas said after a particularly rough patch. "The ranch is in a beautiful valley. You'll be comfortable there." Lillian nodded, uncertain what to say. This man was essentially a stranger one she had agreed to marry, yet he showed more concern for her well-being than any man had in years. "Mr. Maddox, I feel I should explain." "Lucas," he interrupted gently. "Please call me Lucas." "Lucas," she amended. "I should explain about my condition." He shook his head. "Not now. You need rest and healing first. There's plenty of time for explanations later if you choose to give them." The remainder of the journey passed in silence, broken only by the creaking of the wagon and the steady rhythm of hooves. As they crested a hill, Lucas pointed ahead. "There it is, Maddox Ranch." The property sprawled across a verdant valley bordered by pine-covered hills. A sturdy two-story house stood as its heart, with several outbuildings scattered around it. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. "It's beautiful," Lillian breathed, momentarily forgetting her pain. Lucas's expression softened with pride. "My father built it. Started with nothing but determined hands and a dream. I've added to it over the years." As they approached, an older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her weathered face broke into a welcoming smile. "That's Mrs. Abigail Parker," Lucas explained. "She helps around the house, cooking and such. Lives in town but stays over sometimes when work keeps her late." The wagon rolled to a stop, and Lucas jumped down, moving around to help Lillian. "Careful now," he murmured, strong hands at her waist as she descended. "Mrs." Parker's smile faltered slightly as she noted Lillian's condition, but she recovered quickly. "You must be Miss Vance. Welcome to Maddox Ranch. I've prepared a room for you and have supper nearly ready." "Thank you," Lillian said softly, grateful for the woman's discretion. Lucas gathered her valise and led the way inside. The house was surprisingly comfortable, simple but well-maintained, with solid furniture and touches of warmth throughout. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, chasing away the evening chill. "Your room is upstairs," Lucas said, gesturing toward a wooden staircase. "I hope you find it suitable. Mrs. Parker has drawn a bath for you if you'd like to refresh yourself before supper." The thought of hot water against her aching body was too tempting to resist. "That would be wonderful, thank you." Lucas nodded, his expression still troubled as he observed her guarded movements. "Mrs. Parker will show you up. I need to see to the horses, but I'll be back shortly." Lillian followed the older woman upstairs to a modest but comfortable bedroom. A copper tub stood in the center, steam rising invitingly from the water. "There are fresh towels on the chair, and I've laid out a robe you can use," Mrs. Parker said kindly. "Take your time, dear, supper won't spoil." Left alone, Lillian carefully removed her travel-worn clothes, wincing as fabric brushed against tender skin. The mirror on the dresser revealed the full extent of her injuries. Yellowish-purple bruises bloomed across her ribs and back, stark against her pale skin. Her face was marginally better, the swelling around her eye having subsided during the journey. She sank into the bath with a soft gasp of pain that transformed into a sigh of relief as the warm water enveloped her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to truly breathe. After washing away the dust of travel, she dressed in the cleanest clothes from her valise, a simple blue dress that had seen better days but covered her properly. The Salve doctor. Wilson had provided sat on the nightstand, and she applied it carefully to the worst of her bruises, relishing the cooling sensation against her inflamed skin. Downstairs, she found Lucas and Mrs. Parker in the dining room. Lucas rose when she entered, pulling out a chair for her. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much, thank you," she replied, the simple kindness nearly undoing her composure. Mrs. Parker served a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Despite her previous lack of appetite, Lillian found herself hungry, the rich flavors awakening her senses. Throughout the meal, Lucas maintained respectful conversation, careful to avoid pressing topics that might cause discomfort. "Miss Vance will need rest," he informed Mrs. Parker as they finished eating. "Would you mind preparing the spare bedroom? I think it's best if she has her own space for now." Lillian looked up in surprise. "But I thought we had an agreement," Lucas acknowledged, his voice gentle. "But circumstances have changed. You need time to heal, Miss Vance, both body and spirit, from whatever happened before you arrived. I won't hold you to promises made under different conditions." Tears pricked at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. I can fulfill my duties as—" "No," he interrupted firmly. "There are no duties to fulfill right now except getting well. The rest can wait." After Mrs. Parker had gone upstairs to prepare the room, Lillian found herself alone with Lucas by the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his features as he stared thoughtfully into them. "I should tell you," she began hesitantly, "about what happened." Lucas turned to her, his expression serious. "Only if you want to. I won't demand your confidence." Lillian twisted her hands in her lap, gathering courage. "My father died 3 years ago, leaving considerable debts. I was forced to move in with my cousin, Edward, and his wife in Boston." The memory made her shoulders tense. "Edward had always been difficult, but after I moved in, he became worse. Drinking, gambling. When he lost, he became violent." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I tried to leave, but I had nowhere to go, no money of my own. When I saw the advertisement about mail-order brides in the newspaper, I thought it might be my escape." She looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. 3 nights before I was to leave, Edward lost heavily at cards. He came home drunk and angry. This was the result." She gestured vaguely at her face, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "I managed to get away, to hide until it was time for the train. I was afraid you would send me back when you saw me." Lucas's expression darkened with anger that she instinctively knew wasn't directed at her. "No one will send you back," he said, his voice low and fierce. "And no one will hurt you here. You have my word on that." The conviction in his voice loosened something tight in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "The room should be ready," he said after a moment, standing and offering his hand. "You need rest. Tomorrow will be a new day." Upstairs, the spare bedroom had been transformed with fresh linens and a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. The bed looked invitingly soft, and Lillian realized just how exhausted she truly was. "Mrs. Parker will stay tonight in the room across the hall, in case you need anything," Lucas explained, lingering in the doorway. "My room is at the end of the hall." Lillian nodded, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "I don't know how to thank you for your kindness." Lucas shook his head. "There's no need. Good night, Miss Vance. Sleep well." "Lillian," she corrected softly. "Please call me Lillian." A small smile touched his lips. "Good night, Lillian." After he left, Lillian sank onto the bed, emotions finally breaking free in silent tears. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerously close to hope. Morning arrived with soft golden light filtering through lace curtains. For a moment, Lillian was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then memory returned the stagecoach, Montana City, Lucas Maddox with his concerned blue eyes and gentle hands. She rose carefully, testing her body. The pain remained, but duller now, the edges softened by rest and Dr. Wilson's salve. After dressing in a simple skirt and blouse, she made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was bright and warm, with sunlight streaming through east-facing windows. Mrs. Parker stood at the stove, humming as she flipped pancakes in a cast-iron skillet. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Lillian admitted, hovering uncertainly by the doorway. "Can I help with anything, Mrs.?" Parker waved her toward the table. "You sit and have some coffee. Doctor's orders a rest, and Mr. Maddox was quite clear that you're not to strain yourself." As if summoned by his name, Lucas appeared in the doorway, his clothing damp with morning dew and smelling of fresh air and horses. "Good morning," he said, his eyes quickly assessing Lillian's condition. "You look better today." The bruises had begun to fade from angry purple to mottled yellow-green, but they were still clearly visible. "I feel better," she replied honestly, breakfast was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Mrs. Parker kept conversation flowing with local gossip and stories about the town's residents, giving Lillian a sense of the community she had entered. Lucas ate quietly, occasionally adding details or corrections, but mostly observing. "I need to check the north pasture today," he said as they finished eating. "A few calves were born last week, and I want to make sure they're doing well." "I could come with you," Lillian offered impulsively, eager to see more of the ranch that was to be her home. Lucas hesitated, glancing at her still healing body. "Are you sure? It's a fair ride and the terrain can be rough." "I'd like to, if you don't mind the company. I've been sitting for days on that stagecoach. Some fresh air would be welcome." A smile tugged at his lips. "All right then, Mrs. Parker can pack us some lunch, and we'll make a day of it." An hour later, Lillian found herself on a gentle mare named Daisy, following Lucas along a well-worn trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The mountains loomed majestically in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped despite the spring warmth in the valley. "How long has your family been here?" she asked, breathing deeply of the clean mountain air. "My father came out in '49 during the gold rush," Lucas explained, relaxed in the saddle of his stallion, a powerful chestnut named Thunder. "Never found gold, but he discovered something he valued more: this land. He worked odd jobs until he could buy his first 100 acres and a small herd. When he met my mother in '53, they built the ranch together. Are they still?" "No," he said quietly. "Ma died of fever when I was 14. Pa followed 5 years later. His heart gave out during a harsh winter. It's been just me since then, though I have good hands working the ranch." Lillian studied his profile, struck by the quiet strength there. "It must have been difficult managing alone so young." Lucas shrugged. "Pa taught me well. The ranch has prospered, grown to over 2,000 acres now." He glanced at her. "What about your family, besides your cousin, I mean?" Lillian's hands tightened on the reins. "My mother died when I was born. My father raised me alone. He was a bookkeeper for a shipping company in Boston, not wealthy, but we lived comfortably enough. He wanted me to marry well, have the security he couldn't always provide." "Would he have approved of this arrangement?" Lucas asked, curious rather than judgmental. A small laugh escaped her. "A mail-order bride to a Montana rancher, probably not his first choice, but he would have liked you, I think. He valued honesty and hard work above all else." They reached a ridge overlooking a verdant meadow where cattle grazed peacefully, new calves staying close to their mothers. Lucas dismounted and helped Lillian down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "This is beautiful," she breathed, taking in the panoramic view. Lucas nodded, pride evident in his expression. "Best grazing land in the territory. Come spring, the wildflowers carpet these meadows like God's own quilt." They spent the morning checking the herd, Lucas explaining ranching basics with patience and clarity. By midday, they had settled under the shade of a large cottonwood tree. For the lunch, Mrs. Parker had packed cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apple tarts. "Can I ask you something?" Lillian ventured as they ate. "Of course." "Why did you advertise for a mail-order bride? She hesitated, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "You're not unattractive and you have a successful ranch. Surely there were local women who would have been interested." Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering. "Montana territory has about 6 men for every woman," he said finally. "And most eligible women are already spoken for. The few who aren't," he shrugged. "Let's just say their interest was more in the ranch than the rancher." He leaned back against the tree trunk. "I want what my parents had: a true partnership, someone who sees me, not just what I own." "When I read your letter, there was something in your words that felt real, honest." Lillian remembered the letter she had carefully crafted, afraid to hope yet desperate for escape. "I meant every word," she said softly. "I promise to be a good wife, to work hard, to respect your home and help build our future. And I promise to provide for you, to be faithful and kind," he reminded her. "Those promises still stand, Lillian, but I won't rush you. We have time to know each other properly before any further steps are taken." The sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. This man, this stranger who was becoming less strange with each passing hour, offered something she had almost forgotten existed: respect. "Thank you," she whispered, Unable to articulate the depth of her gratitude, the ride back to the ranch was companionable, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the land. As they approached the house, Lillian noticed smoke rising from the chimney and warm light in the windows. Mrs. Parker must have started supper, Lucas observed, helping Lillian dismount. Why don't you go in while I see to the horses? Inside, the house was filled with savory aromas. Mrs. Parker greeted her with a warm smile. Had a good day, dear. You've got some color in your cheeks now. It was wonderful, Lillian admitted, surprising herself with her enthusiasm. The land is magnificent, that it is. This territory gets in your blood. The older woman handed her a cup of tea. Sit and rest while I finish up. Mr. Maddox likes his supper on time. Lillian sipped her tea, watching Mrs. Parker move efficiently around the kitchen. How long have you worked for Lucas? Going on 15 years now. Started when his father was still alive. Poor boy needed someone to look after things after his mother passed. She shook her head sadly. Too young to lose a mother, he was. He seems to have managed well, Lillian observed. Mrs. Parker's expression softened. That he has. Built this ranch into something his father would be proud of, but a man needs more than land and cattle, if you ask me. He needs a good woman by his side. Her knowing look made Lillian blush. I'm not sure I'm what he expected, she admitted, self-consciously touching her still bruised face. Nonsense, Mrs. Parker scoffed. I've known Lucas Maddox since he was a gangly boy of 12. He's not one to judge by appearances. It's the heart that matters to him. Before Lillian could respond, the back door opened, and Lucas entered, bringing with him the scent of horses and fresh air. Something smells delicious, Mrs. Parker. Beef roast with potatoes and carrots, the older woman replied proudly. And apple cobbler for dessert. You spoil us, Lucas said with a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Dinner was served in the dining room, the table set with surprisingly fine china that Lucas explained had been his mother's prized possession, brought all the way from Philadelphia when she married. The conversation flowed easily, and Lillian found herself laughing for the first time in months at Mrs. Parker's colorful stories about local characters. After the meal, Mrs. Parker prepared to leave, as her cottage in town awaited. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, she promised. Got some errands in the morning. As the older woman's buggy disappeared down the drive, Lillian suddenly felt the weight of being alone with Lucas. They retired to the sitting room where he built up the fire against the evening chill. Would you like to read? He offered, gesturing to a bookshelf filled with volumes. My mother was fond of literature. There's quite a collection. Lillian explored the shelves, delighted to find several favorites among them. May I borrow this? She asked, holding up a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Of course. Everything here is yours to enjoy. The simple statement struck her deeply. In Edward's house, nothing had been hers, not even the clothes on her back, as he frequently reminded her. Here, this man offered access to his treasured family heirlooms without hesitation. They settled into comfortable chairs, Lucas with a ledger containing ranch accounts, Lillian with her book. The crackling fire and occasional turning of pages created a peaceful atmosphere that slowly unwound the tension she had carried for so long. Later, as they prepared to retire for the night, Lucas handed her the small pot of salve. Don't forget this. Your healing is the priority. His concern touched her. I won't forget. Thank you, Lucas, for everything. His smile was gentle. Good night, Lillian. I'll see you in the morning. Alone in her room, Lillian carefully applied the salve to her bruises, noting with satisfaction that they were indeed fading. As she slipped between clean sheets, the events of the day played through her mind: the beautiful land, the peaceful afternoon under the cottonwood, Lucas's quiet strength and unexpected kindness. For the first time since her father's death, she felt safe. It was a strange sensation, unfamiliar yet profoundly comforting, and she drifted to sleep with the novel thought that perhaps, just perhaps, the future held promise after all. The days fell into a gentle rhythm. Each morning, Lillian woke to find Lucas already about his chores, the scent of coffee greeting her as she descended to the kitchen. Mrs. Parker came each afternoon, bringing supplies from town along with the latest gossip, which she shared liberally as she taught Lillian to cook the hearty meals Lucas preferred. The man loves his apple pie, Mrs. Parker confided as they rolled dough one afternoon a week after Lillian's arrival. His mother's recipe. I've got it written down somewhere. Lillian found herself eager to learn, to contribute to the household that had so readily welcomed her. Her bruises faded with each passing day, the physical pain receding to memory. The deeper wounds, those of fear and distrust, healed more slowly, but heal they did under the consistent kindness she encountered. Lucas, true to his word, maintained a respectful distance, never pressing for more than she was ready to give. They spent evenings by the fire, sometimes reading silently, sometimes talking about their pasts or hopes for the future. She learned about his childhood on the ranch, the harsh realities of frontier life tempered by his parents' love. In turn, she shared stories of Boston, her father's gentle guidance, and her love of literature. What remained unspoken was their original agreement. The wedding that was to have taken place immediately upon her arrival had been postponed indefinitely, with Lucas insisting there was no rush. Still, Lillian was acutely aware that they lived under the same roof, unmarried, a situation that would raise eyebrows even in this relatively permissive frontier community. The matter came to a head 2 weeks after her arrival when Lucas announced over breakfast, "We need supplies from town." "I thought we might go together, if you're feeling up to it." Lillian brightened at the prospect of seeing more of Montana City. "I'd like that very much." The ride to town was pleasant, the early May sunshine warming the air as they traveled side by side in the wagon. Lillian wore her best dress, a modest navy blue with white trim that she had carefully mended, and had arranged her hair in a neat coiffure beneath a simple bonnet. The bruises on her face had faded to barely noticeable shadows, easily covered with a light dusting of powder misses. Parker had kindly provided. Montana City bustled with activity, significantly more populated than it had appeared during her brief stop on arrival. Lucas pointed out key establishments as they drove down the main street: the general store, the bank, the small church at the edge of town, and the schoolhouse beside it. "We'll stop at Jensen's general store first," Lucas decided, pulling the wagon to a halt. He jumped down and came around to help her descend, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Inside, the store was a treasure trove of goods, from practical necessities to small luxuries. Mr. Jensen, a rotund man with an impressive mustache, greeted Lucas warmly. "Maddox, good to see you." "And who might this lovely lady be?" His curious gaze took in Lillian's presence with undisguised interest. "Jens, this is Miss Lillian Vance," Lucas introduced her. "Lillian, Hans Jensen, proprietor of the finest establishment in Montana City." Mr. Jensen beamed at the compliment. "Miss Vance, a pleasure. New to our little community, I take it." Before Lillian could respond, a woman's voice called from behind them, "Lucas Maddox, as I live and breathe. We haven't seen you in town for weeks." Turning, Lillian found herself facing an elegantly dressed woman in her mid-20s, auburn hair arranged in a fashionable style beneath an elaborate hat. Her green eyes fixed on Lucas with unmistakable interest before sliding to Lillian with considerably less warmth. "Margaret," Lucas nodded politely. "Miss Vance, this is Margaret Sullivan, the banker's daughter. Margaret, Miss Lillian Vance has recently arrived from Boston." "How interesting," Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And what brings a Boston lady to our humble town, visiting relatives?" The subtle emphasis on visiting wasn't lost on Lillian. "No," she replied evenly. "I've come to stay." Margaret's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. "Indeed, and you're staying at the Maddox Ranch." Her tone implied volumes. Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Vance is my guest," he said firmly. "We have a standing arrangement." "An arrangement," Margaret repeated, her voice honeyed with false sweetness. "How progressive of you both." Color rose to Lillian's cheeks at the insinuation. Lucas stepped closer to her, his presence reassuring. "If you'll excuse us, Margaret, we have errands to complete." As they moved away to collect their supplies, Lillian could feel the weight of curious stares from other patrons who had witnessed the exchange. "I've created difficulty for you," she murmured, mortified. Lucas shook his head. "Margaret Sullivan has been trying to secure my attention since she returned from finishing school in St. Louis 3 years ago. Her interest is in the ranch, not the rancher. They completed their shopping efficiently, Lucas adding several items to their list that Lillian hadn't requested: a bolt of pretty blue calico fabric, a new hairbrush with a silver handle, and a recent novel by Mark Twain. When she protested that these weren't necessities, he simply replied, "The ranch is profitable. There's no harm in a few comforts." As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Reverend Thomas from the local church approached. He was a slender man in his 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Mr. Maddox, good day to you," he greeted them. "And you must be Miss Vance. Word travels fast in a small town." "Reverend," Lucas acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Yes, this is Miss Lillian Vance." "A pleasure, my dear," the Reverend said, his expression genuinely welcoming. "Will you be joining us for services on Sunday? We're a small congregation, but a warm one." Before Lillian could respond, Lucas spoke. "Actually, Reverend, there's another matter I'd like to discuss with you. Miss Vance came to Montana City as my mail-order bride. Circumstances delayed our wedding, but I believe it's time to remedy that situation." Shock rendered Lillian momentarily speechless. Lucas turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "If you're agreeable, of course. I know this isn't how we planned things, but perhaps it's best not to delay further." The Reverend, sensing the delicacy of the moment, tactfully stepped back. "I'll just check my schedule while you two discuss this. I believe I'm free tomorrow afternoon, should that suit." Left alone beside the wagon, Lillian found her voice. "Lucas, are you certain? You said there was no rush, and I've only been here 2 weeks." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I meant what I said about not rushing you, Lillian, but I can see how uncomfortable this situation makes you. The town is already talking, and while I don't care a whit for gossip, I do care about your comfort and reputation." He took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I made you a promise in my letters to be a good husband, to provide for you, to build a life together. I stand by that promise. But if you need more time, or if you've changed your mind entirely, I'll understand." Lillian searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity. In their 2 weeks together, he had shown himself to be everything his letters had promised: kind, honorable, hardworking. She had come to Montana territory seeking safety and a fresh start. She had found that and more in Lucas Maddox. "I haven't changed my mind," she said softly. "If you're certain, then yes, I would be honored to marry you tomorrow." Relief and something warmer flickered in his eyes. "Then it's settled." He called the Reverend back over and confirmed the time: 3 o'clock the following afternoon. As they drove back to the ranch, Lillian's mind whirled with the sudden change in plans. "I have nothing suitable to wear," she realized aloud. Lucas glanced at her, a small smile playing at his lips. "What about the blue fabric we just bought? Mrs. Parker is handy with a needle, and I'm sure between the two of you something can be arranged by tomorrow." Lillian laughed, surprised by his foresight. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" His expression turned slightly sheepish. "I hoped. The decision was yours to make, but I wanted you to have something nice, regardless." That evening, Mrs. Parker's reaction to the news was predictably enthusiastic. "It's about time," she declared, immediately turning her attention to the blue calico. "We'll have you looking like a proper bride by tomorrow, my dear. Nothing fancy, mind you, but respectable and pretty." The older woman worked with remarkable efficiency, her experienced hands cutting and stitching while Lillian assisted. By the time Lucas returned from his evening chores, a simple but elegant dress was taking shape. "No peeking," Mrs. Parker scolded when he tried to enter the sitting room. "Bad luck to see the bride's dress before the wedding." Lucas retreated good-naturedly, and Lillian felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Lucas Maddox, wife to a man she had known for just over 2 weeks, yet who had shown her more kindness than any man since her father. That night, alone in her room for what would be the last time, Lillian found sleep elusive. She stood by the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape, the silhouettes of distant mountains a dark line against the star-scattered sky. Was she making the right decision? Logic suggested waiting longer, knowing each other better before taking such a permanent step. Yet her heart, so carefully guarded since her father's death, felt strangely at peace. Lucas had proven himself in ways that mattered most, not with grand gestures or passionate declarations, but with consistent kindness, respect, and honesty. Those qualities, she had learned the hard way, were far more valuable than fleeting romance. Morning arrived with clear skies and gentle sunshine, as if nature itself approved of the day's plans. Mrs. Parker arrived early, bearing wild roses and sprigs of lavender for a simple bridal bouquet. The dress, finished late the previous night, fit perfectly the blue calico, complementing Lillian's fair complexion and bringing out the sapphire of her eyes. "Something old," Mrs. Parker announced, fastening a delicate silver locket around Lillian's neck. "This was my mother's. I've no daughter to pass it to, so I'd be honored if you'd wear it today and keep it after." Tears pricked at Lillian's eyes at the unexpected gesture. "Mrs. Parker, I can't possibly—" "Nonsense, child. Every bride needs something borrowed and something old. This serves as both." The older woman's eyes were suspiciously bright as she stepped back to inspect her handiwork. "You look beautiful, my dear. Lucas is a fortunate man." They traveled to town in the wagon, Lillian's stomach a knot of anticipation. Lucas, dressed in his best suit, a dark wool affair that emphasized his broad shoulders, kept glancing at her with a mixture of disbelief and admiration that made her cheeks warm with pleasure. The small church was surprisingly full when they arrived. Word of the hastily arranged wedding had spread through town, drawing curious onlookers and well-wishers alike. Lillian recognized Mr. Jensen from the general store, the blacksmith whose shop they had passed, and several ranch hands who worked for Lucas. Margaret Sullivan sat primly in the back row, her expression carefully composed but her eyes sharp with assessment as Lillian walked past on Lucas's arm. Lillian lifted her chin slightly, refusing to be intimidated. Today was about beginnings, not old insecurities. The ceremony itself was brief and traditional. Reverend Thomas spoke eloquently about the sacred covenant of marriage, the responsibilities each party undertook, and the blessings that awaited those who honored their vows. When the time came to exchange promises, Lucas's voice was steady and sure. "I, Lucas Matthew Maddox, take thee, Lillian Elizabeth Vance, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Lillian's own voice trembled slightly as she repeated the ancient words, binding herself to this man who had already changed her life so profoundly. When Lucas slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's, he had explained earlier the metal felt warm and right against her skin. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas declared. "You may kiss your bride." Lucas hesitated, his eyes questioning, clearly aware of their audience and perhaps uncertain of Lillian's comfort. She smiled encouragingly, and he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle yet held the promise of deeper feeling. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers, Mrs. Parker dabbing unabashedly at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Margaret Sullivan managed a tight smile as she offered brief congratulations before departing. A modest reception followed at the town's only restaurant, where Mrs. Parker had arranged for refreshments. The townsfolk welcomed Lillian warmly, curious about the Boston lady who had captured their neighbor's heart, but respectful in their questions. Lucas remained close by her side, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back in a protective, reassuring gesture that she found surprisingly comforting. As the afternoon waned, they bid farewell to their well-wishers and began the journey home to their home. Lillian corrected herself, still adjusting to the reality of her new status. The wagon rolled along familiar roads, the setting sun painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. "Are you happy, Lillian?" Lucas asked softly, breaking the companionable silence that had fallen between them. She considered the question seriously, wanting to give an honest answer. "Yes," she replied finally. "I am. It's a different kind of happiness than I expected, but it's real." His smile was warm with understanding. "Different how? When I was a girl dreaming of marriage, I imagined passion and romance the stuff of novels," she admitted with a small laugh. "This is calmer, steadier, disappointing." His tone was light, but she sensed genuine concern beneath. "No," she said firmly, "just different, perhaps better in its way, built on something more substantial than fleeting emotions." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "My parents had that kind of love, steady, dependable. It grew stronger with each passing year, each challenge faced together. That's what I hope for us." As the ranch house came into view, golden light spilling from its windows against the deepening dusk, Lillian felt a surge of emotion. This place that had been a refuge was now truly her home. This man beside her, her husband, Mrs. Parker, had gone ahead to prepare the house, and they discovered upon entering a special wedding supper. The dining room table was set with the fine china, adorned with more wildflowers and lit by the soft glow of candles. A bottle of wine, a rarity in the territory, stood open and breathing beside two crystal glasses. "My contribution to the celebration," Mrs. Parker announced proudly. "Now, I'll be on my way. The buggy's waiting, and you two deserve some privacy on your wedding night." The knowing twinkle in her eye made Lillian blush deeply. After the older woman's departure, they sat down to the intimate meal, roast chicken with all the trimmings, followed by a perfect apple pie still warm from the oven. Lucas poured wine into their glasses, raising his in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said simply. Lillian touched her glass to his. "And to safe harbors." The meal was lovely, the conversation easy despite the awareness of what traditionally followed a wedding feast. When they had finished, Lucas cleared the dishes despite Lillian's protests. "Tonight you're not the housekeeper, but the bride," he insisted. "There will be plenty of time for chores tomorrow and all the days after." When the kitchen was tidy, he returned to find her still seated at the table, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on the tablecloth. He took the chair beside her rather than his usual place at the head of the table, close enough that their knees nearly touched. "Lillian," he began gently, "I want you to know that nothing has to happen tonight that you're not ready for. Marriage means many things, and while certain aspects are expected, I'm a patient man." Surprise and relief mingled in her chest. "But it's our wedding night," she said uncertainly. Lucas took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "It is the first of many nights together. I want all of them to be based on trust and mutual desire, not obligation." The tenderness in his expression nearly undid her composure. This man, her husband, continually defied her expectations in the best possible ways. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm not afraid exactly, just nervous." "Everything has happened so quickly." He nodded in understanding. "Then we'll take things slowly, day by day." Later, as they prepared for bed, the practicalities of their new arrangement became apparent. Lucas had moved Lillian's things to the master bedroom, a spacious room with a large four-poster bed that had belonged to his parents. Fresh linens adorned the bed, and vases of wildflowers brightened the dresser and nightstand. "I had Mrs. Parker prepare the room," Lucas explained, somewhat awkwardly. "I can take the spare room tonight if you prefer." Lillian considered the offer, torn between conventional expectations and her own lingering hesitations. "No," she decided finally. "We're married now. We should begin as we mean to go on." They prepared for bed with careful politeness, each respecting the other's privacy. Lillian changed into her nightgown behind a screen in the corner, while Lucas used the washroom down the hall. When she emerged, he was already in bed, the covers pulled to his waist, his broad chest bare in the soft lamplight. She slipped beneath the covers on the opposite side, acutely aware of his presence yet comforted by the space he maintained between them. "Good night, Lucas," she murmured, blowing out the lamp on her side of the bed. "Good night, Mrs. Maddox," he replied, a smile in his voice as he extinguished his own lamp, plunging the room into darkness relieved only by moonlight filtering through the curtains. For a long while, Lillian lay awake, listening to Lucas's steady breathing beside her. The events of the day replayed in her mind the simple ceremony, the kind wishes of the townsfolk, the knowledge that she was now irrevocably tied to this man and this place. It should have felt frightening, this commitment to a life so different from anything she had known. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of rightness, of having found her place in the world after years of drifting. Sometime in the night, she must have moved closer to him in her sleep, seeking his warmth. She woke briefly to find herself curled against his side, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. Rather than pulling away, she settled more comfortably against him, lulled back to sleep by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Morning brought golden sunlight and the realization that Lucas was already gone from the bed, though the indentation of his head on the pillow remained. Lillian dressed quickly in a simple work dress, eager to begin her first full day as mistress of the house. She found Lucas in the kitchen, competently preparing coffee and a simple breakfast of bacon and eggs. He turned at her entrance, his face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning," he greeted her. "I thought you might want to sleep late after all the excitement yesterday." "I'm used to early mornings," she replied, moving to help him with the breakfast preparations. Their hands brushed as she reached for the plates, sending an unexpected tingle up her arm. "Besides, there's much to do. Mrs. Parker won't be coming today, will she?" "No, she'll be back tomorrow. Today it's just us." There was something in his tone, a hint of pleasure at the prospect of a day alone together that made Lillian's cheeks warm. After breakfast, they fell into a comfortable routine. Lucas needed to check the herd in the south pasture, while Lillian took inventory of the pantry and began preparations for dinner. They worked separately yet together, occasionally crossing paths as Lucas came in for tools or water, each encounter marked by growing ease and small, meaningful glances. By late afternoon, Lillian had baked fresh bread, prepared a stew for dinner, and tidied the already neat house. She was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when Lucas returned from his work, his shirt damp with honest sweat, his hair tousled by the wind. "Need help with that?" he offered, taking the heavy basket from her hands. "Thank you," she said, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "Was everything all right with the herd?" "Fine. The new calves are thriving." He handed her a clothespin, their fingers touching in the exchange. "You've been busy today." "I wanted to contribute," she admitted, "to make this feel like my home too." Lucas's expression softened. "It is your home, Lillian, in every way that matters." There was something in his eyes, a warmth, an invitation that made her breath catch. Slowly, giving her ample time to withdraw, he leaned forward and kissed her. Unlike the chaste kiss they had shared at the altar, this one lingered, deepened, his hand coming up to cradle her cheek with exquisite gentleness. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Lillian found herself clinging to his shoulders, the laundry forgotten. "Lucas," she whispered, uncertain what she was asking for, but knowing she needed something more. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with restrained desire. In answer, she raised herself on tiptoes and kissed him again, more boldly this time. With a sound halfway between a groan and a sigh, Lucas swept her into his arms and carried her toward the house, pausing only to kick the door closed behind them. In the sanctuary of their bedroom, bathed in afternoon sunlight, they discovered each other slowly, reverently. Lucas's hands, so capable in ranch work, proved equally skilled in gentler pursuits, awakening sensations Lillian had never imagined. When they finally joined as husband and wife in the fullest sense, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of their union. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Are you all right?" he murmured against her hair. Lillian nodded, too overwhelmed for words. She had expected duty, she had found joy. She had anticipated endurance, she had discovered passion. Most of all, in this man's arms, she had found a healing more complete than any salve could provide, the knowledge that she was valued, desired, and above all, safe. "I never expected this," she confessed softly. "When I came here, I hoped only for security, for escape. I never imagined." "What?" he prompted when she trailed off. She raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. "Happiness," she said simply. "I never imagined being truly happy again." Lucas cupped her face in his palm, his expression solemn. "I promise to spend every day trying to make you happy, Lillian Maddox. Not because it's my duty as your husband, but because seeing you smile has become the best part of my day." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm, both comfortable and exciting. Lillian embraced her role as ranch wife with enthusiasm, learning the intricacies of managing a household far from the conveniences of city life. Mrs. Parker continued to visit regularly, her instruction gradually shifting from basic skills to the finer points of frontier housekeeping: how to preserve vegetables for winter, which wild plants made effective medicines, how to stretch supplies during lean times. Lucas, for his part, took obvious pleasure in sharing his world with Lillian. He taught her to ride properly, not just the sedate pace of their first outing but with confidence across varied terrain. He showed her the boundaries of their land, the best fishing spots along the creek that bisected the property, the hidden meadow where rare wildflowers bloomed in spectacular profusion each spring. Their nights together grew increasingly passionate as Lillian shed the last of her inhibitions, discovering in Lucas a lover both considerate and ardent. Sometimes they came together in urgent need after a day of meaningful glances and accidental touches. Other times they loved slowly, exploring and savoring each sensation until they fell asleep entangled and sated. Summer bloomed across the valley, bringing longer days and the constant work of ranch life. Lillian learned to help with calving, to mend fences, to distinguish between harmless snakes and dangerous ones. Her hands, once soft from city living, developed calluses that she wore as badges of honor. Her skin bronzed in the Montana sun, and her body grew stronger from honest labor. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Lillian felt a strange fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with the spicy stew they'd had for dinner. "Lucas," she said slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen, I believe I might be with child." His head turned sharply, eyes widening. "Are you certain?" "Not entirely," she admitted, "but I'm late and there have been other signs. Mrs. Parker mentioned something last week that made me wonder." Joy transformed his features, making him look younger, almost boyish in his excitement. "A baby," he breathed, reaching for her hand. "Our baby." The wonder in his voice brought tears to her eyes. "You're pleased then?" "Pleased." He laughed, pulling her into his embrace. "Lillian, I'm ecstatic. A family of our own, it's more than I dared hope for so soon." Dr. Wilson confirmed her suspicion 2 weeks later during a visit to town. "Congratulations, Mrs. Maddox," he said with a kind smile. "I'd estimate you're about 2 months along. The baby should arrive sometime in February." The news spread quickly through Montana City, bringing a flurry of well wishes and practical advice from the community that had gradually accepted Lillian as one of their own. Even Margaret Sullivan, recently engaged to a lawyer from Helena, offered somewhat stiff congratulations when they encountered each other outside the general store. As summer gave way to fall, Lillian's body changed with the seasons. The first subtle rounding of her belly filled Lucas with fascination. He would often rest his hand there in the quiet evenings, as if attempting to communicate with the tiny life they had created. "What do you hope for?" Lillian asked one night as they lay together in the darkness. "A boy or a girl?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, his hand warm against her growing abdomen. "Healthy," he said finally. "That's all that matters, but if pressed." She felt rather than saw his smile. "A little girl with your eyes and spirit would be a blessing beyond measure." The thought of a daughter brought both joy and trepidation. "What if I don't know how to be a good mother?" she confessed her deepest fear. "I never had one to learn from." Lucas gathered her closer. "You'll be a wonderful mother, Lillian. You have so much love to give and such a gentle heart despite everything you've endured. Our child is fortunate to have you." His confidence bolstered her own, and as the baby grew within her, so did Lillian's anticipation. She sewed tiny garments in the evenings, worked alongside Mrs. Parker to preserve the summer's bounty for winter, and helped Lucas prepare the small room adjacent to theirs as a nursery. The first snow fell in early November, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland that took Lillian's breath away. Standing at the bedroom window, her hands cradling her now prominent belly, she watched the gentle flakes drift down in the pre-dawn light. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lucas murmured, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her, his hands covering hers protectively. It's like a different world, she agreed, leaning back against his solid warmth. I never saw snow like this in Boston. It turned gray and slushy almost immediately in the city streets. Here it stays pure longer, he said, though we'll have our share of mud come spring thaw. The baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly enthusiastic kick, making Lillian gasp softly. Lucas chuckled, having felt it against his palm. Someone's awake early, he observed. Someone is always awake when I wish to sleep, she complained good-naturedly, turning in his arms. Your child apparently shares your boundless energy. He kissed her tenderly. My child, is it? I seem to recall you were an enthusiastic participant in its creation. Heat rose to her cheeks at the memory, her body responding to his nearness despite her ungainly state. Pregnancy had not diminished their desire for each other. If anything, Lucas seemed to find her changing body even more alluring, his touches reverent and his gaze appreciative. Winter settled over the valley, bringing shorter days and longer nights spent by the fire. Christmas approached, and with it, preparations for their first holiday as a married couple. Lucas brought home a small pine tree from the foothills, setting it up in the corner of the sitting room for Lillian to decorate with homemade ornaments and strings of dried berries. On Christmas Eve, a light snow fell as they sat together after dinner, the room illuminated only by firelight and the candles on the tree. Lucas presented Lillian with a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. What's this? She asked, surprised. They had agreed to modest gifts, conscious of the expenses a new baby would bring. Open it and see, he urged, his expression boyishly eager. Inside the package, nestled in a bed of cotton, lay a delicate silver bracelet adorned with a single charm, a miniature horseshoe for luck. Lucas, it's beautiful, she breathed, touching it reverently. It was my mother's, he explained. Pa gave it to her their first Christmas together. I found it in the attic last month while looking for the cradle. There's room for more charms, one for each child, according to Pa's letters. Tears pricked at her eyes as he fastened it around her wrist. I'll treasure it always, she promised, leaning forward to kiss him deeply. Her gift to him was more practical, a new leather-bound ledger for the ranch accounts, embossed with his initials, and a knitted scarf in deep blue that she had worked on secretly during his evening absences checking the herd. Perfect, he declared, wrapping the scarf around his neck immediately. Exactly what I needed. They retired early, the anticipation of Christmas morning lending a childlike excitement to their bedtime ritual. As they lay together in the darkness, the baby moving restlessly between them, Lillian felt a contentment so profound it bordered on disbelief. I never thought I could be this happy, she confessed, her voice barely audible over the winter wind outside their window. Lucas pulled her closer, his hand finding its customary place on her rounded belly. Nor I, he admitted. When my father died, I thought I would spend my life alone with this land. You've given me so much more than I ever expected, Lillian. January brought bitter cold and heavy snows that temporarily isolated the ranch from town. Lucas worked tirelessly to ensure the livestock were fed and sheltered, often returning to the house with frost in his beard and exhaustion in his eyes. Lillian, increasingly confined by her advancing pregnancy and the treacherous conditions, focused on keeping the home warm and welcoming for his return. As her February due date approached, a mild spell allowed Dr. Wilson to make a precautionary visit to the ranch. Everything looks to be progressing normally, he assured them after examining Lillian. The baby is in the proper position, and you're in excellent health, Mrs. Maddox. First babies often come late, so don't be concerned if you go past your time. Despite his reassurance, Lillian felt an increasing sense of anticipation as February began. She woke one morning to find Lucas already dressed and preparing to leave for the barn. The north pasture fence needs mending, he explained, pulling on his heavy coat. A tree came down in the wind last night and took out a section. I need to move the cattle before any wander off. Be careful, she urged, pressing a cup of hot coffee into his hands. The weather report in yesterday's newspaper mentioned another storm coming. He kissed her forehead. I'll be back by midday. Mrs. Parker is coming at 10 to help with the laundry. Try to rest while I'm gone. Lillian nodded, though they both knew she was unlikely to sit idle for long. After Lucas departed, she busied herself with breakfast dishes and bread dough, humming softly as she worked. The baby was unusually active, shifting and kicking as if sharing her restless energy. By mid-morning, a dull ache had settled in her lower back. Thinking it merely the result of standing too long, Lillian sat to rest, only to feel a strange tightening across her abdomen. When it happened again 20 minutes later, stronger this time, she began to suspect these were not ordinary discomforts. Mrs. Parker arrived promptly at 10, bustling in with her usual cheerful efficiency. One look at Lillian's face, however, stopped her in her tracks. "It started, hasn't it?" She asked knowingly. Lillian nodded, both relieved at the older woman's presence and suddenly terrified at the reality of what was beginning. "I think so. The pains are still far apart, but getting stronger. First babies take their time, Mrs. Parker assured her, setting aside her basket and helping Lillian to a comfortable chair. "Where's Lucas?" Fixing the north pasture fence. "He said he'd be back by midday." Mrs. Parker nodded briskly. "Plenty of time then. First things first, we need to prepare the bedroom and heat water. When the pains are closer together, we'll send for Dr. Wilson." The next few hours passed in a blur of increasing discomfort, punctuated by practical preparations. Lucas returned shortly after noon, his expression changing from contentment to alarm as Mrs. Parker met him at the door with the news. "Is she all right?" Lillian heard him ask, his voice tight with concern. "She's doing just fine," Mrs. Parker assured him. "First babies take their time, as I've been telling her. Dr. Wilson should be fetched soon, though." Lucas appeared in the bedroom doorway, his face pale beneath his tan. "Lillian," he breathed, crossing to take her hand. "Why didn't you send one of the hands for me?" She managed a small smile despite the building pressure in her lower back. "There was no need to worry you. Everything is proceeding normally, according to Mrs. Parker." He kissed her forehead, his lips cool against her increasingly warm skin. "I'll go for the doctor myself. Will you be all right until we return?" "She'll be just fine," Mrs. Parker interjected firmly. "Go on now and ride carefully. We've plenty of time yet." After Lucas departed, the labor intensified steadily. Lillian paced the bedroom when able, leaned heavily on Mrs. Parker during the strongest contractions, and focused on the thought of finally meeting the child she had carried for 9 months. Lucas returned with Dr. Wilson as the winter afternoon began to darken toward evening. The doctor's calm presence was reassuring as he examined Lillian and confirmed that everything was progressing normally, if somewhat slowly. "First babies often take their time," he echoed Mrs. Parker's earlier sentiment. "You're doing beautifully, Mrs. Maddox. Just listen to your body and rest between pains." Lucas refused to leave her side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, and murmuring encouragement when the pain threatened to overwhelm her. As night fell fully, the labor intensified to a crescendo that left Lillian gasping and doubtful of her strength to continue. "I can't do this," she whispered during a particularly brutal contraction. "Lucas, I can't." "You can," he insisted, his voice steady though his eyes revealed his distress at her suffering. "You're the strongest person I know, Lillian Maddox. Our baby is almost here, and then this will all be a memory." Dr. Wilson, checking her progress, nodded in satisfaction. "It's time to push with the next contraction, Mrs. Maddox. Your baby is ready to be born." What followed was the most challenging and miraculous 30 minutes of Lillian's life, with Lucas supporting her back and Dr. Wilson calmly directing her efforts. She found reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. When the final push brought their child into the world with a lusty cry, the exhaustion and pain faded into insignificance. "A boy, Dr. Wilson announced, placing the squalling infant on Lillian's chest. "A fine, healthy son." Tears streamed down Lillian's face as she gazed at their child, red-faced and indignant at his abrupt entry into the world, yet perfectly formed with a shock of dark hair that promised to match his father's. "Lucas, look at him," she breathed. "He's beautiful." Lucas's own eyes were suspiciously bright as he gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "He's perfect," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mother." They named him William Thomas Maddox William for Lillian's father, Thomas for the Reverend who had married them and who christened the baby a month later in the small church in Montana City. The christening became a community celebration, with seemingly the entire town turning out to welcome the newest resident and shower his parents with gifts and good wishes. Spring arrived in a burst of new growth and color, the ranch coming alive after winter's dormancy. Lillian, recovering her strength quickly, resumed her duties with William either in her arms or sleeping nearby in a cradle Lucas had crafted during the final weeks of her pregnancy. On a particularly fine April day, almost exactly a year after Lillian had first arrived in Montana territory, Lucas suggested a picnic in the meadow where they had shared lunch during that first ride together. William, now 2 months old, slept contentedly in a basket as they spread a blanket beneath the same cottonwood tree. "Happy anniversary," Lucas said, producing a small package from his pocket. "1 year since you stepped off that stagecoach and changed my life forever." Lillian opened the gift to find a second charm for her bracelet, a tiny silver heart. "It's beautiful," she said, holding out her wrist for him to attach it beside the horseshoe. "One for each year together," he explained, "to match the ones for each child. There will be more then." She teased, glancing at their sleeping son. Lucas's smile was warm with promise. "As many as you want," he assured her, drawing her close for a kiss that spoke of continued passion despite the changes parenthood had brought. As they sat together in the spring sunshine, William sleeping peacefully beside them, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a battered, frightened woman stepping off a stagecoach with nothing but bruises and desperate hope, to a confident ranch wife and mother, treasured by a good man and accepted by a community she had come to love. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About beginnings," she replied, leaning against his solid strength. "About how the worst day of my life led me to the best decision I ever made." He kissed the top of her head, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I thank God every day that you found the courage to answer my advertisement," he confessed. "You brought light back into my life, Lillian, and you gave me safety when I needed it most," she said softly. "Not just shelter and salve for my bruises, but the safety to be myself, to grow strong again, to learn to trust and love." William stirred in his basket, making the small grunting sounds that preceded waking. Lillian moved to lift him, cradling him against her shoulder as his eyes, the same clear blue as his father's, blinked open to observe the world with newborn wonder. "He has your eyes," she observed, not for the first time. "And your spirit," Lucas countered, touching the baby's cheek with gentle fingers. "Look how alert he is, how determined." As if to prove his point, William's tiny hand closed firmly around his father's finger, holding on with surprising strength. Lucas laughed, delight evident in his expression. "See what I mean? Strong-willed already." Like both his parents, Lillian acknowledged with a smile, "He'll need that strength for life on the frontier." Lucas nodded, his expression turning more serious. "This land demands resilience," he agreed. "But it rewards it too, with beauty and bounty and freedom." Looking out over the meadow where wildflowers were beginning to carpet the ground in a riot of color, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Lillian felt a surge of gratitude for this place that had become home. "I wouldn't want to raise him anywhere else," she said with quiet certainty. "Nor would I," Lucas agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about expanding the ranch. The Phillips property to the east is available another 1,000 acres with good water access. It would secure our future, give William a larger inheritance when the time comes." Lillian considered the idea, appreciating that he sought her opinion on such matters rather than simply announcing decisions. "If you think it's a sound investment, I trust your judgment," she said. "This land has been good to us." "To us," he echoed, raising his coffee cup in a small toast. "To the Maddox family and the legacy we're building together." As they packed up their picnic later, William sleeping again after being fed, Lillian paused to take in the vista one more time: the rolling hills, the distant mountains, the clear Montana sky stretching endlessly above them. "This land," so foreign to her a year ago, now felt like an extension of herself, a vital part of the life she and Lucas were creating together. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in breathtaking hues of orange and pink, William sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them, Lucas reached for her hand. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About coming here, about our hastily arranged marriage, about any of it." Lillian turned to look at him, this man who had transformed from stranger to husband to beloved partner in the space of a year. "Not a single one," she replied with complete honesty. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me exactly where I was meant to be." Lucas's smile, warm and tender in the fading light, was all the answer she needed. They sat in contented silence as the first stars appeared overhead, their hands entwined, their sons sleeping beside them, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Montana sky. In the years that followed, the Maddox family flourished alongside their expanding ranch. Lillian gave birth to a daughter, Emma Rose, 2 years after William's arrival, and later to twin boys, James and Joseph, completing their family. The silver bracelet Lucas had given her that first Christmas eventually carried 7 charms, one for each child and one for each decade of their marriage. Montana Territory became the state of Montana, bringing changes and progress to the frontier. But the essence of their life remained constant, built on mutual respect, genuine affection that deepened into abiding love, and the resilience they had each brought to their union. And if visitors to the Maddox Ranch sometimes remarked on the unusual beginning of Lucas and Lillian's marriage, the mail-order bride who had arrived battered and afraid, the rancher who had offered healing and safety, the couple would exchange a private smile, knowing that some of life's greatest blessings arise from the most unexpected circumstances. For Lillian, who had stepped off a stagecoach with nothing but bruises and desperate hope, had found not just a safe haven but a true home in the embrace of the Montana landscape, in the community that had accepted her, and most of all, in the arms of the man who had seen past her injuries to the strength within.